Have you ever experienced a jump scare while either watching a movie or a TV show? I know I certainly have. Your heartbeat probably started racing, you might have even physically jumped, you probably started sweating. Now imagine experiencing those same symptoms when someone drops a book on the ground or you hear a door slam. Well, for those who live with post-traumatic stress disorder, that is how they can possibly react to what we would consider everyday occurrences. Millions of people across the world experience post-traumatic stress disorder yearly. In my informative speech, I will inform you of the causes, symptoms, and treatment options for post-traumatic stress disorder. I will also describe how PTSD can heavily impact a person's daily life and family dynamics. So what is PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder? The Mayo Clinic describes post-traumatic stress disorder as a mental health condition triggered by a terrifying event after either experiencing it or witnessing it. PTSD can develop within either a month of experiencing trauma, or for some people it takes years to develop. This quote comes from the Mayo Clinic's article titled Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder by Sandhya Pruthi et al. The hallmark feature of PTSD is re-experiencing events where the person experiences vivid, emotionally intense intrusions of a past event, which may feel as if the event or main aspect of the event is happening again. This quote comes from Trauma Therapies for Psychosis, a State-of-the-Art Review, which is an article written by Amy Hardy. So PTSD can be triggered by any traumatic event, whether that is after experiencing like a car crash or a serious injury, or being involved in combat and life-threatening situations. So what are the symptoms of PTSD? The symptoms can be categorized into 4 different categories, the first of which is intrusive memories. So this can include experiencing flashbacks, having recurrent nightmares, or having distressful reactions to things like a car backfiring, and that taking me back to what combat was like. The next category of symptoms is avoidance. So this can mean avoiding talking or even thinking about your traumatic event. This can mean avoiding people, places, and activities which remind you of your traumatic event. The next category is physical and emotional reactions. So this can include being easily startled, or always feeling on guard and as if you're in trouble constantly, having self-destructive behavior, so that means you could possibly be like driving excessively fast, drinking excessively, using drugs, having difficulty sleeping and concentrating, always feeling on edge, irritable and angry, and feeling guilty are all symptoms within this category. The last category is negative mood and thoughts. So this can mean having negative thoughts of yourself and others, feeling hopeless, having memory issues, and feeling detached from your community and those around you. This list of symptoms comes from the Mayo Clinic's post-traumatic stress disorder article. So as you can probably imagine, these symptoms will have an impact on your relationship with your family and just your everyday life in general. It is not possible for one family member to experience difficulties without affecting the rest of the family. This quote comes from Zara Mata's article titled Challenges of Living with Veterans with PTSD from the Perspective of Spouses, a qualitative content analysis study. So because the symptoms can mean being angry and easily irritable and having a hard time connecting with others, this is going to have an impact on a person's family dynamic and is going to make it difficult for a parent to express their love for their kids and people who they do love. So kids who have parents with PTSD can experience extreme anxiety, feeling abandoned, frustrated, hopeless, resentful, withdrawn from the society, sad. They may feel as if they've lost a parent, confused, guilty, agitated. This list of feelings that kids who have parents who have PTSD experience comes from the article titled Experiences of Parental PTSD for Children aged 9 to 17 in Military and Emergency First Responder Families by Karen May and 3 others. So the symptoms do not only affect a person's family dynamic, but it also affects a person's everyday life. So veterans who are at a higher risk of post-traumatic stress disorder experience mental health, physical health, and psychosocial difficulties at a higher rate than their civilian counterparts, each of which is a known risk factor for homelessness. This quote comes from the mediating role of social support in associations between childhood adversity, military sexual trauma, and homelessness, and a nationally representative sample of U.S. veterans by Nicole Bulanchuk et al. So although PTSD has very negative effects on a person's life and relationships with others, there are treatment options for the disorder. So the first grouping of treatment options is called psychotherapy. So there are three main different types of psychotherapy options used in treating PTSD. The first of which is cognitive therapy. So this is a form of talk therapy where a person discusses why or how they're feeling, and this helps them to understand why they think that way and help them to overcome their emotions and traumatic events. The next form of psychotherapy is called exposure therapy. So this is a form of safely facing your trauma and learning how to cope with this. So in recent years, this has been used by using virtual reality, so a person can actually see their traumatic events again and learn how to cope with that. The next form of psychotherapy is called EMDR, which stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So this is a form of therapy where a person recounts their traumatic event while listening to directions the therapist gives them on how to move their eyes. And this can help a person to reprocess their emotions attached to an event. Medications can also be used in treating PTSD. Some of the most common medications used are antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications, and prazosin. This list of treatment options comes from the Mayo Clinic's article, Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder. So the most recent form of treatment is called sleep healing. So by intervening in slow wave sleep can alter emotions attached to specific memories. This quote comes from Scientific American's article titled Sleep Healing by Ingrid Wickelgren. So this article describes new technology which has been used to help a person process their memories in their sleep by triggering their senses like their sense of smell, touch, taste, and hearing. And it can help them to cope with their traumatic memories while they're sleeping, because people with PTSD tend to experience nightmares of their trauma. So this is a way for a person to cope with their traumatic event in their sleep instead of while they're awake, which is a little bit less stressful. So recently, Apple Watches have actually been used to sense a person's rising heart rate when they're sleeping, which is when they're having a nightmare, and a gentle vibration is sent to their wrist to help them calm down and overcome that nightmare. So throughout my speech, I have discussed the causes, symptoms, and treatment options for PTSD. I also have described how PTSD can heavily impact a person's life and family dynamics. Thank you for listening. I hope you learned something about PTSD.